Hey chaps, super quick one. Do you think the Xbox handheld will just be next generation's Series S and the same deal for PlayStation's equivalent? Tom?
I think so. I think that's a fairly reasonable. It won't be matching. I don't think it's going to hit that level, but it'll be broaching that sort of spec, and especially when we dial it down to a smaller screen, it's going to be perceptibly quite similar to that sort of level of experience. Fewer graphics options, as we've seen on Series S. Maybe one single way to play it. I can imagine, and a lower resolution, depending on what they're targeting. They're probably, let's assume 1080p display. So yeah, a lot of that will match up, and that's kind of scaling down from where 1440p is the target for Series S, kind of in an ideal scenario. It kind of raises a question about what developers will target, in terms of, the multi-plat games. If there's another, maybe sub-Series S hardware sort of point to target, and same with PlayStation as well. We can imagine that they're going to target something substantially lower than what we've got in PlayStation 5 in order to get that running on a, in terms of battery life on a mobile. So yeah, the developers have got to really balance that load between portable systems and the current ones, and we're probably going to be anchoring like the ambitions of game lower as a result because of that.
Right. I think there's two concepts here. The concept that there'll be two SKUs for the next generation, and then the concept that the lower end SKU, which is almost certainly going to be the handheld SKU, will have like Series S performance power. So from my perspective, I think that the lower end SKU will be the handheld SKU, but it probably won't be super, super cheap. And I also think that you may well have Series S class performance, but it will have more modern features. There's a lot of talk at the moment about the UDNA unified architecture that AMD is looking into and developing at the moment. So yeah, I think there'll be some sort of much stronger focus on ray tracing and machine learning than there is in the current Series S, but probable sort of raster performance at Series S level. That would be a really good target to hit, and still ambitious, I'd say. What would you say to that, Oliver?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too sure about this. I think that if the next Xbox handheld leans on Windows in the way that we think it might, I don't know that it would necessarily map perfectly onto that Series S concept as a device that is a console that's basically getting guaranteed support and bespoke game versions over the course of the generation. It may be more like Steam Deck, where basically everything runs, but it's basically, your experience can be a bit inconsistent from that hardware. You might have to configure games yourself. And some developers might put special effort into getting lower settings for that device and having everything run well. Some developers may not. So I don't know. It could. There are a number of ways it could go there, but one way would be that more Steam Deck route, where it's really up to the end user and support is not necessarily guaranteed. Or maybe there's some kind of level of support that's guaranteed, but not the same level of for sure compatibility that you get with the Series S. For Sony, I don't know. I'm kind of two minds about it. On the one hand, they are really committed to console generations, it seems like. So you lean towards thinking that it would be a Series S style device and they would support it as the baseline console spec for the PS6 generation. I think that's probably the more likely possibility. But on the other hand, it's probably not going to have full PS5 game compatibility in all likelihood without games getting patches to support this new PS Portal device. PS Portable device, I should say, not PS Portal device. Obviously, we already have that. And that's kind of a bit of an awkward fit to me, at least. It might have full or close to full PS4 game compatibility because the spec should be capable of that. But the PS5 compatibility is kind of a question mark. And then I guess the question is, would it have full PS6 compatibility? I don't know. I would kind of lean towards yes, if they are introducing this, let's say in 2 years or 3 years, potentially alongside the new console, the PS6, or right before it. I think it makes a lot of sense to say, hey, this is our minimum spec console. Maybe you lose the high resolution support, you lose the 60 FPS modes to some degree, you lose the 120 FPS modes to some degree, but we're going to give you an experience where you get a portable version of your PS6 games. I think that's a compelling proposition. But at the same time, it's kind of a less than ideal fit with their existing PS5 console offering there. So I don't know if they would potentially consider the idea that we'll pitch this as a machine that runs many PS5 games and all PS4 games and some PS6 games. Would they go that route, or would they go all in and say this is a Series S-like machine that actually does support all of the contemporary software? I'm not totally sure which way they go with it. I'd probably lean more towards the latter if they are offering this as like a full-on big hardware offering, as opposed to something like the PS Portal, which is more of an accessory. I would kind of think they would go with that approach, that Series S-like approach for that console.
Yeah, I think it's going to be they're going to be scaled down versions of whatever the next generation hardware is, right? I think that's the bottom line. There's got to be commonality there. There's in order to introduce scalability. So the concept of a PS6 game running on the handheld is actually viable. So, I'm fully expecting that the architecture of PlayStation 6 and whatever Xbox is coming up with is going to be very different to what it is today. I think there's going to be, as I said, machine learning and ray tracing considerations built in. The question really is how it's going to tackle the existing digital libraries. I don't think they can put out a device that doesn't have support for their existing ecosystems. I think that's going to cause big problems for them. And that might be one of the reasons why we're having to wait so long for them, because, I don't think the current generation of hardware could do that. Really interesting question. I do think there will be two SKUs. I do think one of them will be a handheld. The question is really the extent to which they're interoperable. And I think they've got to be. And I think there's still this question mark over the whole digital library thing. If you've got like a PlayStation digital library and you can't play your PlayStation games on the handheld, on the one hand, I guess it could be, people have seen that before with like the PSP and the Vita and whatnot. You start a new library, but I honestly think that you shouldn't need to at this point, especially when you've got the ROG Ally doing a pretty good job of running PC games for the most part. So, I think the fact that we're waiting so long for these devices to come along is probably indicative of the fact that the technology just isn't there at the moment, but it will be at some point.